The IPFW men's volleyball season continued this past weekend as the VolleyDons traveled to the Keystone State of Pennsylvania to take on St. Francis University and nationally ranked Penn State University. Unfortunately for the VolleyDons, they suffered 2 defeats this past weekend, losing both in 3 straight sets. I'll be joined this week by head men's volleyball coach Ryan Rock-Parat, and we'll discuss this weekend's events as well as looking forward to this coming weekend against George Mason University and New Jersey Institute of Technology. During the Spotlight segment, I'll be joined by senior middle blocker David Frazee as we discuss not only his role in his position on the team, but also how since coming to IPFW 3 years ago as a transfer, he's been able to grow and develop as a player. I'm your host, Jordan Armstrong. Stay tuned for more on VolleyDons Weekly on CTV. Welcome back to VolleyDons Weekly. I'm your host, Jordan Armstrong. We'd like to thank this week's sponsors, Alco, Active Ankle, ASICS, Glenbrook Dodge, and Hyatt Place. As I said during the opening, the IPFW men's volleyball team traveled to Pennsylvania this weekend, where they faced St. Francis University and Penn State University. 2 tough matches this weekend for the VolleyDons as they lost both in straight sets. As I'm joined now by IPFW head men's volleyball coach Ryan Rock-Parat. Tough weekend for the VolleyDons.
Keystone State, that's Pennsylvania.
That is.
I could have used a lot of keystones this past weekend in the Keystone State after our performance, both Friday and Saturday night. The Keystone State.
So, saying that you needed those, it sounds like it wasn't that successful of a weekend overall, not only from a results standpoint, but also from the effort and execution that actually took place on the court.
Yes, for the most part, 95% of that is accurate. The St. Francis match, we didn't have a chance. And the biggest disappointment about that match is the fact that they outworked us in all facets of the game, especially in the defensive area. Their serving was very good, their blocking was dominant, their backcourt defense was exquisite, and then their offensive game was just hard to slow down. And we just couldn't get going with anything. And of all the things, our effort and our attitude were by far the worst it has been this season. There was no competitive oomph or fire. I kind of changed the lineup a little bit. I started Alex Dickman instead of Andy Sullen at the opposite spot to give Andy an opportunity to rest a little bit. But you know, we were never into it. And their emotion, they had a great crowd on hand. Their emotion, their hunger, their competitive desire, we couldn't match it.
Well, when you also look at the player matchup of the personnel that St. Francis has compared to who we had on the court this past weekend, not only from an overall roster standpoint, but also from the players that actually played, St. Francis is a much more experienced team this year compared to in years past, especially in comparison to the way our team matches up with having so many freshmen that ended up playing, and freshmen and sophomores, I should say, that played for us this past weekend also.
But I think St. Francis had a majority of their team are a bunch of sophomores and juniors. I know they have a couple seniors, but not many. Last year, St. Francis was a very young volleyball team, and they were all freshmen. And the increase in terms of their play from a year ago to this year is tremendous because I tell you, they were hungry from the get-go, and their execution was at a high level because of that energy factor and the work ethic factor that they had, especially defensively.
From a statistical standpoint, despite the fact that, yes, we lost 3 sets in 3 straight sets, but also that, as you said, they outworked us, and the stats definitely show that in not only a blocking standpoint, but also a defensive digging standpoint. From the middle, it seemed like we were able to have a lot of success with both David Frazee and Graydon Schrader, but then as the match went on, their middle blockers definitely made an adjustment and started to commit a little bit more with our middles, which then created some problems for us on the outside.
Well, our best players up until this point have been David Frazee, who will join you in the spotlight, and Graydon Schrader, freshman. I mean, both of those guys are hitting close to 400, which is the number you want to be as a middle attacker. They're leading our team in blocking. They average 1 block per set. on average. And so what happens is the more we go to them eventually, the more teams are going to key on them. And some teams have made an adjustment. Penn State did the exact same thing on Saturday. They made a couple adjustments, and they were able to slow them down a little bit. But then our left sides couldn't produce again on Friday night and on Saturday as well, for that matter. And so it becomes a combination of where do you look for answers. You need to get secondary scoring. And when Andy Sellen is not playing, our primary scoring then becomes the middle. And then you look for secondary scoring somewhere else, and unfortunately we couldn't find it.
As you said, alluded to a lot while you were speaking there about the match then on Saturday against Penn State, a nationally ranked team who, it seems it's been years since they didn't come out of their conference and make it to the Final Four, so a perennial powerhouse in terms of the men's volleyball landscape throughout the conference. What was it like having the team being not only so young, kind of another Stanford situation, playing a very high reputation program and big name school, as we say, the difference in playing Penn State compared to when we opened up at home and played Stanford?
There's an old adage, boomer, Chris Berman says this all the time, one of my faves on television. He says this all the time about numbers, or stats for that matter. He says 1 is an accident, 2 is a trend, and 3 is a bona fide problem. Says it all the time. And on Saturday night against Penn State, at Penn State, in the very opening set that we had, we played with the same intensity and focus and quality as we did when Stanford was here. And it's pretty agitating to a head coach when the team can get up for, apparently it seems, for a big name school or institution like a Stanford or a Penn State, and not against a lesser name school, like for example a Sacred Heart, a Harvard, or St. Francis. We had an opportunity to win the opening set because we played pretty good volleyball and intense volleyball. Ended up losing a very close set, 28-26, I believe, on a couple errors down the stretch. But it was disappointing to see. Well, 2 things happened. Number 1, I restarted Andy Sellen Saturday night. Number 2 is the fact that it's disappointing to see the fact that we had the capability of playing so well and so dialed in in terms of our execution and our effort, but we don't do that on a consistent basis, and that was really frustrating. Even the second set was relatively close, at least for half of it, and then Penn State ended up pulling away. And so it's something that we've discussed about our team, about, hey, why can we get up for the big name schools, the Stanfords and the Penn States of the world, but we can't get up for everybody else? Well, you're not always playing a Stanford or a Penn State every night. You got to go out and play the game as if you're playing a Stanford or a Penn State every night, and we're trying to find answers to those questions. As
you alluded to, the VolleyDons suffered a 3-0 defeat at the hands of Penn State, losing 28-26, 25-17, and 25-15. But despite that scoreline, there were definitely some positives that came out of that match. Not only was it one of the best blocking efforts from the team, having 10 total blocks against an opponent like Penn State, but also a personal milestone for senior opposite Andrew Sellen, who reached his 1,000th kill throughout that match.
Well, we dominated the net in blocking. I mean, and we're one of those teams that usually are outmanned or outsized because Penn State's a big volleyball team and they're an athletic volleyball team. And I was really surprised at how well we dominated the net all night long. In regards to Andy and his 1,000th kill, which is a wonderful accolade for him, he joins an elusive club in that regard with 1,000 kills, and that's to his credit. He's a very athletic individual on the right side. He's able to do things that not a lot of people can do in or out of system, and it helps when you have individuals like David and Graydon who can draw the attention of the defense to open up Andy on the pin and have some really good success.
And with that, you're just setting me up for perfect segues. As we come back here to VolleyDons Weekly, we'll be joined by senior middle blocker David Frazee to not only talk about blocking and his position as a middle, but also how since coming to IPFW 3 years ago as a transfer, he's been able to grow and develop as an athlete. We'll be right back here on VolleyDons Weekly.
We've got the course where we run a restaurant for 10 weeks. And it's really tough and not easy in the classroom with these things, because this is a place where it becomes real. We're preparing 300 or 400 dishes in 4 hours, serving 150 customers, and and you're having to analyze the data and do menu engineering afterwards at 11 o'clock at night. Just like you'd do if you had your own business, you'd have to do these things.
Welcome back to VolleyDons Weekly. I'm your host, Jordan Armstrong. Joining me this week for this week's Spotlight is senior middle blocker David Frazee, who hails from West Palm Beach, Florida. Missing West Palm Beach a little bit about this time of the year, huh?
Just a little bit. It's pretty cold outside, yeah.
Not too bad, though, without any snow on the ground compared to the snow that you guys saw this weekend over in Pennsylvania.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. The Snowzilla, as they called it, was pretty incredible to see. So.
Definitely. So kind of as Rock was talking about during the first segment, blocking has been a really big thing, not only for you positionally, but also for the team, and having a much better blocking effort on Saturday against Penn State compared to St. Francis Friday night. How do you kind of prepare in terms of learning about your opponents for what their tendencies are in blocking and which directions you kind of need to focus on when you're going to block on the court?
For me, I still do struggle trying to figure that out exactly. It helps a lot with the film from Coach Rock and JW. Really, the biggest thing I look for is which is their stronger hitter. Okay, I'll look for their best hitters, and then I'll go from there. Obviously, I need to key in on the middle hitter first, and it helps if they're a weaker hitter at their position. And then from there, it depends on the pass. And it's a bunch of stuff, and it's honestly pretty tough for me. But really, for me, mostly it is just the superstar of the other team. I try to focus on him more than the rest.
So elaborate a little bit more. You mentioned scouting reports that you get from the coaching staff. What is it that those scouting reports entail, and how do we go through them as a team? Tell the folks at home a little bit about that.
The scouting reports this year compared to last, they're just a little bit more detailed. With that, I mean there's a lot of statistics and numbers. They break it down through serving, the tendencies, attacking, of course, and just little telltales throughout the other players. Basically, we'll go through first the opponent serving, and we'll see where they like to serve, what kind of serve it is, and from there, when we go through it's pretty detailed. We'll go through all of that, and then we'll look at the attacking of the other opponents. And from there, we'll look at a typical game they played. Say they played Penn State. We watched them play, I'm not sure, one of their recent games we watched them play.
Lewis,
right. Okay, and so that was a good game.
Lewis.
So yeah, they would show you who got set so much, how many times, and how well they did, and all of that. And they even have little diagrams that they give us for our scouting reports of where they'll hit the ball the most, their tendencies, whether it's cross court, down the line, tip shots, all of that. It really is a pretty big help, and the coaches do put a lot of effort into doing that for us.
So with that, talk about your expanding role. For your first 2 years, you came in as a transfer,
right,
with 3 years of eligibility left. So after your first 2 years, with the graduation of both Ramon Burgos and Brian Saunders, you've kind of stepped up into the role of not only being the most senior middle blocker on the team, but also really asserted yourself into the starting lineup, both from an offensive standpoint and also a defensive standpoint. So how has that transition been for you, going from being someone that would always work incredibly hard during practice, especially with the acknowledgement that Coach Ball gave you last year with the Most Improved Award out of everyone on the team,
right,
but how that all has translated into you now going in every single day and having to be that guy in the middle,
right,
that's kind of that steady rock for the team.
It's an incredible difference, and I'm not honestly sure where to start, but Ramon and Brian, having them in practice every day since I came here, they've really challenged me. And coming from Florida, they're not the best volleyball state, I would say. So where I was playing, I was kind of looked at as the big dog. So coming here, it was a big change, and having Brian and Ramon to challenge me every day was one of the best things I could ever ask for. So now that I'm stepping up and being the starter, one of the starting middles, it's difficult because I have to take more of a leadership role. And even though I was sort of a leader back home, coming here it's different. This college experience is different, and it's been really challenging so far because I can't have my head down. I can't look like I'm disappointed or mad at anyone, no matter what happens. I need to keep a steady face and be happy and be encouraging and positive, and that can be really challenging at times.
So continuing with potential challenges, how is it for you now, a little bit of a role reversal? You're not only the senior middle blocker, but all of the other middles that on the team, they've now only been a part of IPFW volleyball for the past 5 months because they're all freshmen.
Right.
So how has that relationship kind of built upon itself from you being the upperclassman senior to all of them that you're not only competing with for a starting spot, but also trying to compete and make better, similar to what the middles before you did for you?
Right, and that is also difficult for me because they aren't used to the college experience, the college playing style, and I don't think they get it yet, what they're really getting themselves into, which isn't a bad thing because they are new, but they will soon, I believe. And really, it's hard not to get frustrated with them and myself at how we play sometimes in practice as well as in the games. But we do have a little bit of time left to get that going, and that's where I'm going to try and step up and make them really take it as serious as we should. So.
Gotcha, very nice. As Rock alluded to also, the offensive part of your game is such a huge thing also. You're one of our most explosive hitters with your timing in the middle. While blocking may be more of a challenge, it seems like the offense side of it comes a little bit more natural for you. What is it about the offensive side of your position that you like so much?
I honestly, I just love hitting the ball way more than I do blocking the ball, which isn't the best thing I've been told.
Not necessarily what a coach likes to hear from
yeah,
the middle.
Yeah. I always considered myself a middle hitter instead of a middle blocker, and that is probably a bad thing to think about. But I am working on that, and we did have some success with Penn State. I need to strive every day to work harder at blocking and worry less about hitting, because I think the hitting so far is doing pretty well, and the blocking could definitely use some work. So every day in practice, I'm really trying to focus on blocking because for me, you have to want to block the ball instead of, oh, I have to go block the ball. That's the difference. If I think that to myself, oh, I want to block this ball, I want to do it. The point is, it's just as good as a kill, if not better, stopping them. So.
Now, with all of that, the volleyball part of it all aside, you are still a student athlete here on campus.
Right.
Talk a little bit about your anticipation of graduation, how finishing up school is going for you, and what you plan on doing once you graduate here from IPFW.
That's kind of in the air right now. Actually, everyone I tell this is they laugh a little bit because I'm saying I'm looking into being a firefighter, or well, there's two situations. I'm going to be graduating in May with a general studies degree. But that's not where I want to stop. It depends now if I'm going home after this graduation or if I'm staying here. If I'm staying here, I'm going to probably enroll back in IPFW and look at the nursing program and see if I can get into that. And if I do go home, my uncle is actually the chief firefighter at Pompano Beach, the fire department there. So he said I could work into going there. So that's what I'm looking into.
Definitely sounds like you have a really good plan either way, regardless of the situation. What is it that, after coming to IPFW 3 years ago, that looking at as your time kind of comes to an end, some of the big things that not only you learned on a volleyball court, but also about yourself personally?
Oh man, so far it's been such a struggle, but it's also been the biggest blessing in my life. Everything I've done that's led me to get here, which was going to my first year in Pfeiffer University, and then transferring home to Palm Beach State, and then transferring here again. All of that has been such a blessing for me. I'm so glad that I'm here, and really, the one thing I'll take away is just how hard you have to work actually to be here, and it's just so worth it.
Definitely, and Coach Ball used to always say you don't necessarily realize all the blessings that you have throughout all the struggles that you go through until years down the road, but it sounds like you've kind of already been able to start reflecting on that a little bit more. For kind of circling back to what we already talked about a little bit, what would be your biggest piece of advice that you would give to the group of young middle blockers that you have with you now?
I actually got this piece of advice. It's nothing too big, but just stay positive. Scott McNerney, our libero, he was my pepper partner as soon as I got here, my first year here, and he would always get me through practice by just saying, David, just stay positive, you're getting better, you're going to do it. And honestly, that's all I feel like you need to do.
And definitely seems that not only through the positive attitude that you bring on the court, but also the growth that I've been able to see firsthand with you as not only an athlete, but also individual over the past 2 years has definitely been a really big step for you, and I can't wait to see what you do the rest of the season.
Thanks, Jordan.
That does it for David Frazee here in the Spotlight segment. We'll be wrapping the show up in the next segment, bringing head coach Ryan Rockprat back out here to talk a little bit more about this weekend's upcoming matches. Stay tuned for more on VolleyDons Weekly on CTV.
So everybody said to me, you are really going to paint in public and people can talk to you and ask questions and stuff, and I said, whatever it takes, I will do it. What's central to my work is individuality. When you look at another person and they're looking back at you and you realize the entire universe is behind those eyes, it's an authentic miracle. And individuality is such an incredible thing. Everybody is so different.
Welcome back to VolleyDons Weekly. A big thank you to David Frazee during the Spotlight segment for sharing with us a little bit about his experience and time here at IPFW. Some really insightful stuff that I'm not sure you would have gotten David to say 3 years ago or even last year during an interview trying to talk with him a little bit more about his time here at IPFW.
David has come a long way. The one thing that stands out, at least for me, when I listen to David, and obviously the way that he's played, the first quarter of the season is maturity. His maturity level has just skyrocketed in the last year, and that's just a testament to him and what he has overcome and where he is and all the hard work he's putting in to be successful. And you're right, he was really reserved here coming in, and now he's one of the boys, and he absolutely loves the experience.
Definitely. The success that he not only was able to have this past weekend against some taller, more athletic middle blockers than we've seen earlier in the season, hopefully will translate this coming season as the VolleyDons hit the road again to face George Mason University Friday night at 7 o'clock, and then continue on to face New Jersey Institute of Technology Saturday at 7 o'clock also. What do you think about the upcoming matchups for this weekend?
Well, I don't like him.
Do you not like them because of the matchups? Do you not like them because we're not playing at home on a Friday night, which seems to be the only time we can get a win right now? To which part do you not like the matchups?
I don't like that, that's for sure. We're not playing at home where we're undefeated. I don't like the fact that our matches are not on the Cinco, CTV. Well, my good friend Jay Hosick is the new head coach at George Mason. He was the longtime assistant coach at Penn State. Now he's in his first year at George Mason. And George Mason has always been a very, very talented but underachieving volleyball team. They have size, they have speed, they have skill, and that is a dangerous combination when you talk athletics. And Jay is a very disciplined volleyball coach, and he's a very, very good coach and a very good motivator. The matchup scares me because I think they're going to be hungry to get an opportunity to knock off a top-tier Division I program. And if we don't come out ready to play, we're going to get smoked. The NJIT match, I read a couple things about NJIT because I have not seen them yet on videotape. I know they have a couple athletes, big kids who can jump. But the thing that scares me about NJIT is that they are predicting, those people who do all this prediction stuff, they never predict themselves winning the Powerball, but they predict volleyball and everything else, that NJIT will be a middle to top tier team in the EIVA this year for the first time in many, many years. So that also scares me. In fact, a brother of a former player here is the head coach. Kevin Goncalves was the player here. His brother Danny is now the head coach there. So it's just a tough weekend of volleyball for us, but it's part of the reason why I put them on the schedule is because we need to face tough non-conference opponents to prepare us for our regular season in the MIVA.
Definitely, and the back-to-back road weekends to the East Coast kind of also prepares the team for that adversity that you get as you get into the MIVA schedule. Yeah. But let's get back to the matchups this weekend, especially looking at NJIT a little bit more from what I've seen through the not only stats that I've compiled already for us, but also a little bit of video. It seems at least their offense is kind of predicated to a similar extent to how we do ours. They try to get their middles a lot of touches when they can, but if not, they go pin heavy, and they don't necessarily, or they haven't necessarily had the amount of success on the pins that they would like to, very similar to our team. So seeing a team that could be very similar to what we have, how do you think that can potentially play in the matchup?
Well, that helps, and the reason probably why they're like that with their statistics is because it's a direct influence of passing. And I talked to you about this last week and the week before. It's about serving and passing. If you can win that battle within the battle, then your chances of being successful increase dramatically. So my guess is that's probably a direct result with that. I think it helps us for the fact that I think physically we match up against them pretty well. I think we did the same thing when we were here at Sacred Heart. I thought we matched up very well against them, and it's easier to play. It's always easier to play two types of teams. I've always believed this. It's always easier to play a team that you match up very well with or a team that's bigger than you. And the reason why, when the teams are bigger than you, you actually have nothing to lose. And the game is elevated because they always want to bring their game down to you. It's like a tall person always bends over to talk to somebody who's shorter. They always have to come down to your level. So I've always believed that when you play somebody of equal stature, I think for the most part you match up pretty well. And because we see it on an everyday basis with pin-heavy offense, et cetera, then we should have no surprises with NJIT.
2 road matches for the VolleyDons this weekend, both against really 2 quality programs that have had a pretty hard non-conference schedule themselves before. NJIT has only been out to the Santa Barbara Invitational, where they played 3 California teams, and then George Mason kind of going not only facing UCLA at home, but also going out to Provo, Utah to play in the AVCA Invitational. So very similar to the scheduling that we've done in the early part of our season. Seeing that conference play is only a week away, how does all of those early matches kind of play into where you want to be right now, heading into conference play next week?
Well, you hope for the fact that you take something away in every non-conference match you play. That's number one. Number two, you try and stay healthy. You try and redefine your game a little bit. You try and redefine the chemistry of the team if it's not going very well. And you get different looks of people outside of your conference that you think are going to mimic your conference. I think George Mason might be equivalent to, for example, Ohio State. There's nobody that can, maybe Penn State, that might be equivalent to Loyola with 2 big middles and a quick tempo offense. So it helps by having that kind of comparison or comparability about playing teams outside of your schedule that kind of look like teams within your schedule but doesn't count on your conference record.
And with that, we'll be looking forward to seeing how the VolleyDons do this weekend, taking on George Mason and NJIT, as kind of maybe a preview as to how the beginning part of the MIVA schedule coming up in another 2 weeks could be for the VolleyDons. A big thank you again to our sponsors, IAB, Indiana Physical Therapy, Molten, O&E, and Pizza Hut. I'm your host, Jordan Armstrong, for our guest, David Frazee, and head coach, Ryan Rockparat. Thank you for joining us this week on VolleyDons Weekly. And don't forget, you have to get your serve in.